Welcome to the ANEW Body Insight podcast, empowering and inspiring your journey to optimal health. Hosted by Dr. Supatra Tovar, clinical psychologist, registered dietitian, fitness expert, and author of Deprogrammed Diet Culture. Rethink your relationship with food, heal your mind, and live a diet-free life. And Chantal Donnelly, physical therapist and author of Settled, How to Find Calm in a Stress-Inducing World. We follow our guests' journey to optimal health, providing you with the keys to unlock your own wellness path. Tune in and evolve with us. Welcome back to the ANEW Body Insight podcast. We are back for the second half of our interview with amazing executive coach for moms, Leanna Lasky McGrath. If you missed the first half of this interview, please go back and listen to it. Leanna's amazing. She gave us insight into her journey from tech perfectionist to finding balance and joy, and I can't wait to pick her brain some more. Welcome back, Leanna.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to have this conversation continue.
Me too. So we left off at self-care. And self-care, I think, I try to prescribe that as a doctor would prescribe it for all of my female clients especially, but just all of my clients in general. I think we tend to put ourselves last, especially women, and we're conditioned to put ourselves last. We're told that we're being selfish, that we should put our family first. Give me your ideas on self-care and how do you help your clients embrace that and bring that into their lives?
Yeah. I think we're conditioned and rewarded, especially I see it in childhood, how girls are so positively reinforced when they are helping other people and things like that. And that's not a bad thing, of course, right? We want to teach kids to help other people, but I just notice it balanced more toward the girls than it is toward the boy, the things that are noticed and positively reinforced. So I think it is ingrained in us for sure. And it makes it very difficult for us to feel okay about it and to feel like either A, that it's not selfish, or B, that it's okay to be selfish. But I think that for all of my clients, I would say I don't have the credentials to prescribe as I'm not a doctor, but that is something that
you can prescribe self-care.
I always recommend it. I would strongly recommend it. But I also think it's important to take some time to figure out, what do you need? Because I think that a lot of times whenever we hear self-care, we think, a spa day or these like big things. And to me, self-care can be very simple, can be not take a lot of time. And I think that because of the way we tend to go to all or nothing, it's either we're taking care of ourselves or we're not. And so it's really just kind of like a practice regularly of checking in with ourselves and asking, what do I need right now? Do I need a break? Do I need to stand up and walk around? That is self-care. And it's, I think, just noticing what do we need in this moment? Or at the end of the day, am I feeling really drained? Okay, if I look back, where would it be helpful tomorrow to maybe build in some breaks or take a minute to myself, or maybe I ate lunch at my desk today and I'm gonna not do that tomorrow, or whatever it is. I think it's just a continuous cycle of what's working, what's not working, what do I need, and just being really in tune with that and then meeting our needs. And I think the point of it being for us is it's for us, of course, but really I think that the stepping stone is understanding that when we take care of ourselves, we can show up so much better for everybody else. So I think sometimes, especially moms, need to hear that something's going to benefit their children. And I think that we all know that whenever we're able to take a breath, whenever we're able to take a little bit of time for ourselves, whenever we're taking care of ourselves, that we're able to show up so much better for our kids, that we can show up better for our employees, for our partners, for our friends and our family. And so I think that if we need a thought, if we're not able to do it because we feel selfish about it, then understanding and adopting that mindset that this is really, it's for me, but it's so much for everybody else as well.
I agree. And I think on top of that, we need to model
Oh,
new behavior for our kids.
yes.
If our kids are watching our mom, just going crazy, stressed out, frazzled, tired all the time, kids model that. They think that that's what I have to do in order to be the best mom. But if you can really break it down, and I see this all the time with my clients, they're not performing well. They're not at their best. Sometimes they're snapping at their kids because they're exhausted.
Yes.
And so I think it's so important to schedule accordingly. And I like how you term it in that. I think that really helps, especially a lot of executive moms, grasp the concept that it doesn't have to be, you don't have to go to the spa all day. You can actually schedule your self-care. For example, for me, I make sure before I sit in front of clients all day long that I've done what I needed to do, that I've exercised, I ate well, I have a massage chair, I sit in that thing, and that thing is my bestie, best friend. I take my dogs on a walk, and I make sure that I am ready and present.
Yes.
I'm not hungry, I'm not tired before I sit in front of people, because then I can attend to them and help them better. So I love that you equate that to also being able to help people better. Then I also know that 2 p.m. hits, I'm done. I need a nap. I'm sorry. Like, I got to log off, and I'm going to come back. And when I do, I feel amazing. And I'm able to handle the rest of my day. So how we schedule ourselves, I think, is really important. And if we just added time for ourselves, and there is time in the day, no matter how busy you are, there's time in the day to give yourself a little something that's going to help you have the energy to take care of things. So I love that. And I say self-care, like you say, does not have to be huge. So let's actually pivot a little, and let's talk about imposter syndrome. I don't know of anyone in the professional world, and oh my gosh, in the psychology world, imposter syndrome is real. When you first get out there and you are trying to be the professional, I think most people deal with imposter syndrome. So give me an idea of the advice that you give with people struggling with that self-doubt in their careers.
Yeah. I think starting with the fact that it is so normal that everyone is doubting themselves in some way. Even the CEO might be showing up and having doubts about some part of their life, right? We all do it to some degree. And so I think that so often one of the things that we do is we look at everyone else and we think they have it all together. They are so sure of themselves because we see whatever they decide to project. And we don't know all of the thoughts that are going through their minds, but we do know all the thoughts that are going through our minds, all the self-doubt. We have 12 to 60,000 thoughts a day. 80% of them are negative and 95% of them are repetitive. So we're constantly, like, our brain is going in the background, constantly telling us negative things about ourselves if we're not keeping it in check. And so we're having all these thoughts, and everybody else is having those thoughts too, but we don't see it. We only see whatever they decide to project. And so I think we get the full picture of ourselves. I think that's so important to remember that, because I think feeling imposter syndrome feels very like isolating and alone. And if only people would talk about it more. I actually did a group coaching program of women, and someone talked about imposter syndrome, and then someone else, and all the feedback from that session was just like, it's just so amazing to have a space where we can talk about this, because no one at work is ever going to admit to feeling this way, but everybody's feeling it, and everyone's doubting themselves in some way. And so I think it's just so important to remember that, like, we get the full picture of us, and we get this like tiny little pieces, only what makes it out to the surface for other people.
Yeah, I think we're also conditioned to have to project this image
Yes.
of perfection.
Mhm.
And that's what makes people so hesitant to talk about it.
Mhm.
If I admit that I am feeling weak,
Mhm.
if I am feeling vulnerable, if I am feeling scared, it means that people are going to look at me as weak, as incapable.
Mhm.
And I think that that is a disservice to everyone, not just women. There's a great Brene Brown TED talk
Mhm.
about vulnerability
Yes.
and how it actually is such a strength. And I agree with that. I think it takes so much courage
Mhm.
to admit that you're vulnerable. It takes so much veracity and strength
Mhm.
to say, I have no idea what I'm doing. I need help. And it's okay. And when you do this, like in your group, I think it's so
Mhm.
powerful because then everybody's, oh my God, is it actually okay to admit that?
Mhm.
And I think if anybody gets anything out of this podcast, you guys, it's okay to admit that you're scared. It is okay if you are struggling, and you can talk about it, and talking about it will help bring community and will help to break down this idea that we have to be
Yeah.
perfect. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that we mentioned earlier that workplaces are set up by men. And so the workplace norms are to not show emotions except the acceptable ones of like anger and kind of anger is the allowed emotion, and of course happiness and positive emotions. And so it's just it'd be so interesting if women had set up workplaces. Would we be talking about these things and just be able to be real about them and then be able to, oh, everyone else feels it too. It was like an audible sigh of relief, collective sigh of relief of, it's not just me.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, I love that. So you talk about authenticity in leadership. And I think that this is aligned with that.
Yes.
Share a moment when you realized the power of leading authentically, and how did this influence your coaching philosophy?
Yeah. So coming from the tech world, there were not many women. I was the only woman on the executive team at every company I worked at. And so I I think when I started out, I was 25 and I had a master's degree in education, but all the guys had business degrees and business experience, and I didn't have business experience. I'd come from education. And so when I joined the company, my first company, I thought, okay, well, I guess I'm just supposed to do it this way. And I shape shifted and just did things the way that was being modeled. And I just found after some time that though my team was getting the business results, we were meeting our goals, I didn't feel good about it. And I was seeing some morale challenges and retention challenges. And I remember so vividly always just being like I'd have an idea and it would be so different from the rest of the group that I would be like, I must be wrong. I must be way off
Mm.
base here because everybody else is thinking of this so differently. And and then something actually happened where I had a little bit of a falling out with the C-suite. And I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to do it my way. I'm just going to show up as me. I'm just going to follow my instincts. And I started doing that. And it was amazing. I felt amazing. It was such a great response. And
Yay.
I mean, in our executive meetings, I would just be like, no, that's a terrible idea. I didn't say it quite like that, but I would just share my ideas and they were like, oh, I never thought of that. And I guess I started to learn that just because I was thinking differently didn't mean it was wrong. Just because I had totally different ideas and a totally different approach to leadership, it was just my way of doing it. And it was actually very effective. I just needed to learn to trust myself and enough to be able to follow those instincts and to show up like me. And I think that so often because of workplace norms that are not designed by women or for women, a lot of times we hold ourselves back from really showing up as we are, as our true selves, and bringing ourselves to the roles. And so I focus a lot with my clients on authentic leadership, defining what is leadership to you? What do you want? How do you want to show up as a leader? And we look at what are some good examples of leadership that resonate with you, and what are some examples of leadership that maybe you've seen in your career that do not resonate with you. And so often the women I coach have not had examples of leadership that really resonate with them when they've been working in very male-dominated industries. And so you say, actually, I want to show up very differently than what's been modeled for me. And it takes courage to do that. And but I think that the results speak for themselves, because I just, when I did it, I started to just feel so much more alive and me. And I think our organizations miss out on the full what we can bring to the role. And
Yes.
and I think it's just so important to pull that out of women and help to build that confidence to be able to go in and show up as ourselves.
And I'm wondering, and this is a little bit of an offshoot, but I am wondering about your experience with coaching women who work with women as opposed to who work with men. Now, I have heard the gamut when it comes to women working with women. And I think that there is a lot of competitiveness that is naturally promoted among women working with women. And so you see some certain dynamics that you don't necessarily see women working with men. Tell me your thoughts on that. Do you find that women have a harder time sometimes working with other women, especially if it's in the kind of high achieving environment? And what do you think is behind that?
Yeah.
If so.
Well, I have a lot of thoughts about this. I would say that in my experience, it has been more that my clients are coming to me saying, I wonder if she's thinking the same thing. I wonder if she's having the same experience as me. Do you think it's appropriate to have that conversation with her? And it's just more, I want to have an open conversation. I want to be vulnerable, but is it safe? And so I think that is often a question. In terms of women I coach who have female bosses who report to female leaders, I think that what I notice is what they're able to share and how they're able to show up is they're having different kinds of conversations. And so, but it really, it could be the type of women and the type of men that my clients are working for as well. So I think that it can show up in a lot of different ways. I think that sometimes it's unfortunately human nature to have this mindset of, if I had to do it, then you should have to do it too, right? So for a senior leader who had to make it in the man's world kind of thing, sometimes I think that exists. Like, why should you get special treatment when I didn't? Unfortunately, right? And I don't think that that's everyone, of course. I think that there are lots of women who make it up the corporate ladder and then are throwing a rope and helping more women up that ladder and being supportive and not wanting to recreate those circumstances that they had to go through to get there, and wanting to make it a better experience. So I think it really depends on the people and who's there.
Yeah. And I think I always like to introduce the concept that there really isn't competition. I know that it seems like there is. You may be going for the same job. You may be vying for the same promotion at work, but there really is no comparison between people. And I think if people really embraced that, they would behave differently at work. They would see it as a collaboration more than a competition. And I think for women, it comes down to conditioning again. I think it depends on the messaging that they got growing up from their parents from their peers growing up, if they felt like it was a cutthroat environment, then they're going to go into work with that same mindset.
Yes.
And I think that that does a disservice to them, and it does a disservice to the working environment.
Mm-hmm.
And I would agree with you too that women who have had to claw their way up
Mm-hmm.
the ladder, especially in the 80s and 90s,
Mm-hmm.
when women were really starting to achieve these leadership positions, it was really hard for them.
Yes.
And they had to deal with so much misogyny and so many
Discrimination,
terrible comments.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
thankfully now, especially with the Me Too movement and things, there are just certain things that can't be said, and you can't slap your secretary's butt as she walks
Yeah.
by anymore, thank God.
Mm-hmm.
But I can understand people holding on to that and saying, no, you're going to have to go through the same rings of fire that I had to go through.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be thinking any differently. But I think that also does a disservice to the cohesion at work. And so I really hope people kind of embrace that we're not competing against each other, and that we all can support each other. And if we allow for conversations and we allow for vulnerability, then that only serves us better.
Yeah.
So now I want to pivot again, and I want to talk about remote work. So remote work has become prevalent. Thank you, Lord. I love remote work. I love being at home.
Yes.
But how do you see the challenges and opportunities for working moms evolving in the corporate landscape with this remote work life balance happening?
Yeah. So I think that since there are more remote work opportunities, I mean, in every space I'm in with other moms, it's just a godsend. I mean, it's so helpful to be able to not have to spend so much time commuting and being away from your children. Yes. Kids get sick so often, especially post-COVID, and the bugs are bigger and they take longer to get over. And I mean, I swear it's just, there's just constant sickness, and you're having to be home with your kids. And so when you have to go to an office and take time off, use PTO potentially, or sick days to be home with your kids, it just gets really draining. But if you can just do your job at home and be with your kids and support them while they're sick, but then go to your computer and do some work and then go take care of your kids. And I think it's just such a blessing for working moms to have that option. I think also, of course, with anything, there's two sides of the coin, and there are also challenges with it as well, because I think that number one, of course, like all the return to work mandates that are happening. And so now you see Amazon pulling everybody back to offices. And so if you found a great job and you're doing great work in your home, and then suddenly the situation changes, that's really stressful. And then at that point, you have to decide, am I going to continue to work in this job? Am I going to get another job? Am I going to pull out of the workforce? Am I going to start my own business? And so you have to then reassess, and it's at the whim of someone else making that decision. I think also, I worked remotely for a couple of years before COVID happened. And it was wonderful when I had my baby, because I was breastfeeding. She never took a bottle. And so I was able to be there and nurse her and not have to be stressed out. I've talked to women who were like going over on their lunch break to daycare to nurse when their baby wanted to take a bottle. And that's just so stress inducing and just takes away our focus during the workday. But I hear from so many women, just being able to get my kid off the bus, being able to walk them to school, those things are so important. And it makes us feel like we're not missing out. It makes us feel like we can really more of both better, right? And we can show up as the mom that we want to be and be there in those important moments for our kids throughout the day. And also as the employee that we want to be. And we can still contribute so greatly to the workforce. So I think it's wonderful. And I just hope more and more companies embrace remote work and stop doing this return to work mandating.
I agree fully. I think whoever's behind that really has an older school
Yes.
mentality that your workforce is going to be more productive if they're there and you have the overseer walking down the cubicles and making sure everybody's doing their thing.
Mhm.
I really feel like people really do want to do a good job
Yeah.
at work. I think that for most people, it's important to them. And so if they're able to do that better at home, they're able to be more productive, they're not stressed out and commuting.
Mhm.
I do think you're going to get better productivity
Yeah.
out of people if you trust them
Mhm.
to do what they're supposed to do. And I think there are so many ways to help ensure that are not authoritarian,
Yes.
that are more collaborative, where if you're really valuing your employees' opinions as
Mhm.
opposed to dictating what they're supposed to do, they're going to want to do better for the company
Yes.
and be more productive.
Mhm.
So I think it's up to leaders to let go of the old business school mentality of how to get the most productivity out of your workforce and to embrace now.
Mhm.
And thankfully, with technology, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I mean, we're able to have this podcast. We're able to have these remote meetings. I don't see the difference personally, other
Mhm.
than I had to schlep my way over there to see you in person. It's lovely.
Mhm.
And I think we don't want to lose that contact, the personal contact.
Mhm.
So I think we need to be more deliberate
Mhm.
in how we choose to go out and people in the world.
Mhm.
Being completely at home, it doesn't necessarily work for most of us. I love it, but I have to get out and people
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
But I think if we're just really deliberate in our leadership, we can still be productive and have happy workers.
Yes.
And I think that is so important.
Agree.
Oh, I can't believe we're almost out
I
of time.
know. It
I
went
could
so
talk to
fast.
you all day. I want to know for you, what's next for
Mhm.
you in your coaching practice? Are there new projects, initiatives, anything that you're super excited about?
Yeah. Yeah. So right now, I mostly work in one-on-one with my clients. I do some groups occasionally, and those are so fun. So I'm planning on doing a group. Last year, I did a January reset, and I plan to in January again do some kind of program where we will get together and just start the year off intentionally and consciously and just be clear about how we want to show up this year. I really just love that like new year energy. I also have been working now with companies, and I did a presentation a couple weeks ago for an all male leadership team on how they can hire more working moms and how they can support them. The team actually had reached out because they lost someone decided to leave, and she was a very valuable member of the team, and she decided to take some time to focus on motherhood and her child. And they said, if we're going to hire more working moms, then we want to know how to support them. And so it was a really fun kind of thing, kind of experience. And actually heard from one of the female employees who said, my CFO last night was asking me if it was okay to contact me after hours. Like that's never happened before. And I was like, oh, that's so great to hear.
Wow.
So I think just continuing to do more work like that. I love working with the individual women, but I think also we need to look at the organizations and how can the organizations help support these women. And then we also need to look at on the systemic level, and especially here in the United States, how can we look at parental leave and paid parental leave, and how can we,
Please.
the cost of childcare now is higher than rent in every single state in the United States right now. And so looking at these things, so I do volunteer work as well with Moms First, and we do advocacy work for that. So it's really just continuing to support the moms that are wanting to continue their career and helping to set them up for success at every level, in the individual, the organizational, and the systems.
Absolutely. I think it's so valuable that you're doing that, and it's so necessary. I love that you work on the individual level, but I also love that you are really expanding your work into the organizational and systemic levels, because you're right. We can try to carve out self-care
Mhm.
and create work-life balance. But if we are oppressed and suppressed
Yes.
in terms of our abilities to get childcare, if our leadership at the office is more of a dictatorship
Mhm.
than a democracy, all the self-care in the world is not necessarily going to help us thrive
Yes, and
in work
it
and
shouldn't
home.
be just on us, right? This is a societal.
Yes.
We're literally raising the next generation of humans to take over the
Yes.
world, right? So it shouldn't just
Yes.
be on the individual woman, and I think that's so important for people to understand that whenever they're feeling like they're failing at everything. I think it's important to know that the systems really aren't setting us up for success right now, and we have an opportunity to make that better. But it's really
I
not
love
the
it.
individual. It's not an individual failing.
Yeah, I love it. And I'm so glad there are people out there like you advocating not just for women to achieve joy and balance in their lives, but really to advocate for women in general in helping elevate us. We're still striving toward equality, which is incredible to me today. But I do think that that's the moral arc of the universe, is that eventually, and hopefully sooner rather than later, we will achieve equality and the respect that I think is deserved in the workplace and also at home. Leanna, tell people how they can get a hold of you. How can they work with you?
Yeah, so I'm most active on LinkedIn. So Leanna Lasky McGrath, you can find me there. My podcast is the Executive Coach for Moms podcast. It's available on all platforms, Apple, Spotify, etc. There's so many out there right now. I also can be found at my website, which is coachleanna.com. And there you can set up a free 1 hour no obligation consultation just to talk through what it might look like to work together, but also what are your goals and where do you want to be, and how can I best support you in getting there. So that's how you can find me. Also, I'm in Instagram, not quite as active there, but Exec Coach Leanna over at Instagram.
Wonderful. Leanna, thank you so much for joining me. You have, I don't know how to describe your energy, but it is just magnetic. It's also just kind and compassionate and empathetic. And it's just so lovely to be able to sit here with you and have this conversation with you. So thank you for joining me.
Likewise. Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you all for tuning into the ANEW Insight podcast. We are looking forward to our next interview, and we really hope you join us next time. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for tuning into the ANEW Insight podcast. Please remember, the content shared on this podcast is for entertainment purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. You can find us anywhere podcasts are streaming, on YouTube at my.anew.insight and at anew-insight.com under the ANEW Insight podcast tab. Follow us on our socials at my.anew.insight on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Threads for more updates. Tune in next time and evolve with us.